Good afternoon, and welcome to today's event, Social Media and Mental Health Research-Based Approaches to Support Adolescent Girls' Wellbeing. I'm Layli Mapayan, Executive Director of the Wellesley Centers for Women, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in for this discussion. Our program will begin with a moderated discussion panel, followed by a Q&A session where we will take questions from the audience. A few housekeeping matters related to this webinar that everyone should be aware of. First, to keep things running smoothly, we will disable the chat. We ask that you send all of your questions using the Q&A feature that you should see at the bottom of your screen. We will be monitoring the Q&A throughout the program, and that's where you can enter any questions that you have for our panelists. Second, we're recording this program, and the video will be posted on our website for folks who are not able to join us this afternoon or for anyone who would like to view the program again. For those of you who are not familiar with the Wellesley Centers for Women, WCW is a research and action institute at Wellesley College. Our mission is to advance gender equality, social justice, and human well-being through high-quality research, theory, and action programs. For more than 45 years, we've been focused on shaping a better world for women and girls, families and communities in all their diversity here and around the world. Mental health and adolescent development are two key areas of our work, and they have never been more important. We are co-hosting today's panel with the Metro West Women's Fund. For those who are not familiar with the Metro West Women's Fund, the fund invests in women and girls through community building, education, and grant making. Their mission is to identify the needs of women and girls in Metro West Massachusetts and raise resources to meet those needs. We are excited to partner with them for today's powerful discussion on middle school girls' mental health and social media use. We will delve into the latest findings from a comprehensive needs assessment conducted by the Metro West Women's Fund, discuss the mental health challenges that middle school girls face in the digital world, and highlight ways to support their well-being. Researchers from the Youth, Media, and Wellbeing Research Lab at the Wellesley Centers for Women will present two innovative approaches aimed at improving girls' mental health and well-being in the digital age. We'll discover how digital well-being and STEM workshops can empower girls to navigate social media with confidence and build resilience. And we'll learn how the Youth Advisory Board provides valuable input on how to apply research studies in meaningful ways to improve mental well-being on social media. Thank you to the Metro West Women's Fund for co-hosting today's program with WCW, and to the Wellesley College Computer Science, Education, and Psychology departments for co-sponsoring. Let me now introduce you to the panelists who will be sharing their expertise with us today. Dr. Linda Charmaraman is a senior research scientist at the Wellesley Centers for Women and director of the Youth, Media, and Wellbeing Research Lab. Her research explores technology and adolescent health with a focus on the positive and negative health effects of youth social media use. She also studies digital citizenship, innovative research methods to include overlooked and hidden populations, and how social identities, including gender, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation, affect well-being. Her research has been funded by organizations including the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Her research has been widely published in academic journals and book chapters, and she's presented at professional conferences and community events across the country to translate her research for practitioners and policymakers. Linda's work has been published by media outlets including the New York Times, the Washington Post, Good Morning America, and ABC News. Linda received her PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Catherine Delcourt is an assistant professor in computer science at Wellesley College. She's also affiliated with Wellesley's Media Arts and Sciences program and the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. Her research interests focus on how people relate to each other through social technologies and the social implications of our increasing dependence on the internet. Her research projects have focused on civility in online conversations, the role of social media in political polarization, identity and anonymity online, and more. Catherine co-leads the Youth, Media, and Wellbeing Research Lab activities pertaining to summer STEM workshops and developing apps for healthy social media use in middle school. J. Maya Hernandez recently received her doctorate at the University of California, Irvine. She's an interdisciplinary researcher at the intersection of developmental psychology, education, informatics with an emphasis on youth development in the digital age. She studies mechanisms of identity development, civic engagement, and mental health as it relates to social media use of historically underrepresented youth through quantitative, qualitative, and participatory action research methods. Post-grad, she will apply her expertise to community nonprofit programming as the incoming director of Next Generation Initiatives at the Go for Broke National Education Center. Her work at Go for Broke focuses on engaging young people through identity exploration and historical preservation to address contemporary social issues which span from grassroots community leadership to leveraging social technologies for action and communication. Rebecca Parkhill and Rachel Sagan, co-founders of the Metro West Women's Fund, are driven by a single goal: to do their part in making their community a place where women and girls are supported and get the services they need and deserve. Building a community of donors with a shared vision also drives this goal. Rebecca is an ordained Unitarian Universalist community minister who has worked in churches in the US and England and with nonprofits, schools, and in the town government social services. She recently served on the board of trustees at the Cambridge School of Weston, where she worked on development and co-chaired the search for the head of school. Rebecca currently serves on the program committee of Young Audiences of Massachusetts, a nonprofit that brings arts education and programming to children throughout the state. She holds a BA from Brown University and a master's in divinity from Yale University. Rachel enjoys a professional life dedicated to public interest law, philanthropy, and nonprofit management. She recently worked as the executive director of the United Way of Acton, Boxborough. Rachel is the principal of Our Generosity Matters, a philanthropic advising practice to family foundations, nonprofits, and donors. She co-chaired the board of the Women's and Gender Studies at Brandeis University. She graduated from Northeastern University School of Law and Harvard University. Rachel received the second annual John R. Heerwagen Award for Nonprofit Leadership by the Middlesex Savings Charitable Foundation and the Outstanding Nonprofit Executive Director of the Year Award from the Middlesex West Chamber of Commerce. So thank you all for speaking on today's panel. Now let's dive in. Over the past few years, the news media has highlighted the negative ways that social media use can impact girls' mental health and well-being. Can you shed some light on the mental health needs of girls using social media? What can research tell us about the ways that girls might be struggling in our increasingly digital world? Linda, I'm going to let you kick us off.
Thank you so much, Layli, for that wonderful intro of our esteemed panelists. I'm actually grateful for the public attention to this very issue being raised in the media, because if we don't start shining a light on it, when else are we going to expect any change, right? So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the nuances that often gets lost in the news headlines. So it's normal to want to explore one's identity and to understand what other people are doing, with their lives, and a lot of times that kind of happens in the online digital worlds. And social media can be a venue to really understand who you are in relation to others. So it's a natural tendency to want to gravitate towards such a venue. This often invites social comparison processes that are also normative, but can be taken too far with the pervasiveness of others online who are also comparing themselves to what you're posting. Sometimes these social comparison processes range from, who and how many online friends you might have, what issues or photos they're posting or sharing, and what is reshared and commented on, who tags you, who notices your posts, and how you are doing lately. Sometimes it helps you figure out if anybody notices you, or how you're doing in life. Girls and individuals who feel isolated in real life can often find a new supportive network online to share their identities or interests so they can have a sense of belonging. So it's important to note that studies are only emerging in understanding the complex link between rising mental health difficulties and the parallel rise in social tech use. Just because they're rising together doesn't mean that there's actually a causal relationship. I don't know if you've heard of correlation does not equal causation. Sometimes in order to address, for instance, a pre-existing mental health status, like maybe you're feeling down, you might use social media as a coping mechanism. You might want to relieve mental states of boredom or stressful situations. And at the other spectrum, social media can invite negative appraisals of one's self-worth or encourage overemphasis of your opinion, your appearance, maybe whatever you want to express as yourself online, which can lead to loneliness, depression, or social anxiety, depending on how much that really matters to you, others' opinions of you. So in the end, there are both adaptive and maladaptive ways in which girls and youth are using social media today.
That's a great overview, Linda. Thank you for kicking us off. Maya, what would you add?
Thank you, Lily, and thank you everyone for having me on this panel. It's a really wonderful opportunity to work alongside such leaders in this work. And so, as Dr. Tremarman just kind of alluded to, there's both pros and cons to social media, and we can't just only focus on the negative. And for me, one of the things that I also look at is being a teen and during adolescence, identity is such a critical part of it. And so in across many research studies, including one that I recently conducted with my dissertation work, we find that girls are consistently the most rapid users of these online spaces and social media technologies. And so, I think it's easy to kind of think that because they're the most rapid users, they are also kind of the most vulnerable and at risk for mental health challenges during adolescence, particularly depression, anxiety, but it does not necessarily mean that they are related. Social media is causing one or the other. And so I think for me, I've tried to take a lens around identity exploration and how that intersects with kind of well-being and the developmental process of being an adolescent, especially as a girl. And so I think as we think about identity exploration and also connectedness and a sense of belonging that adolescents are often yearning for, girls in the research, we find that girls are also particularly more likely to seek out approval from their peers and also prioritize peer connectedness more than boys, especially in adolescence. And so as we think about that, I think it's important for us to think about how might social media, social technologies be amplifying this in many ways. I think we also can acknowledge that there are intersections to the identity itself. And so gender is one identity, exploring being a female, kind of going through all the processes of adolescence, and also how other identities might intersect and be an indicator of how girls might be using social media. And what I mean by this is identity is a pretty broad term, but it could be racial, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation. And so it's a myriad of things that young girls are exploring during adolescent development. And so, for example, research has shown that Black girls or Black teens especially are among the highest users of social media compared to white and non-Black counterparts. And so this has also remained relatively consistent throughout the years. Again, in my own dissertation study recently, I find that there is a rapid social media adoption among Blacks compared to any other racial ethnic group. And so across the 4 years of early adolescence. So they're still the most rapid users of these online spaces. So just kind of keeping that in mind, and also moving more towards qualitative research, which is like interviews, focus groups. Research has shown that youth from historically marginalized groups, such as racial ethnic minorities and those who identify as a part of the LGBTQIA+ community, they often go to online spaces to seek refuge in many ways that they can't find in offline spaces. So something to consider in ways that these online spaces might be helping rather hindering their mental health. And so I think, as Dr. Tremarman alluded to, it's really important for us to consider the flip narrative of how social media might be helping rather than hindering, while keeping in the back of our minds the risks of these online spaces.
Thank you, Maya. I think that anyone with an adolescent girl in their life or a young person can really relate to the things you said. Catherine, what would you add?
Yeah, thanks, Laylee. Thank you, Linda and Maya as well, and for bringing everyone together around this topic. My angle as part of this discussion is coming from the computer science and STEM perspective. For me, thinking about these social media platforms as the tools that mediate the communication between teenagers and their social environment. There are specific design decisions that are made in crafting and constructing these platforms. Those decisions are made in the way that we currently see them enacted, and they could be different in different design ideals. So something that I'm really interested as part of thinking through the implications of using social media for the mental health implications on middle school girls in particular, is empowering them not only to be consumers of these platforms, but also thinking about how they might be empowered to redesign them, to learn about how to be constructors of them. And that's something that I'll be bringing to this discussion today.
Thank you, Catherine. It's really important for us to be able to see things from the angle of vision that you bring. So now I'd like to turn our attention to our colleagues from the Metro West Women's Fund. Rebecca and Rachel, you recently completed a needs assessment to better understand the mental health needs of girls in the Metro West area around Boston, Massachusetts. Why did you decide to conduct a needs assessment, and what did your study show? And how does that relate to some of the national level research that our other panelists just highlighted?
Thank you so much for having us today. We're thrilled to be co-sponsoring this very important event and this discussion that is just critical to the girls in our lives. I'm just going to do a brief background about who we are a little bit, and then we'll dive right into the research findings. So again, my name is Rebecca Parkhill, and with Rachel Sagan, we're the co-founders and co-directors of the Metro West Women's Fund. And the Metro West Women's Fund began in March of 2019 with a mission to identify the needs of women and girls in Metro West and to raise resources to meet those needs. So a women's fund, for anyone who's not familiar with a women's fund, uses a gender lens in philanthropy to effectively address the issues and barriers that women and girls face. So we do this work in several ways. We include grant making to organizations that serve women and girls right here in Metro West. We conduct and initiate research, which we're going to be delving into in a few minutes. And we also convene women and girls serving organizations, elected officials, and other stakeholders to address the trends and issues of facing women and girls in our community. And so I mentioned our grants program. We have a focus in our grants program on 3 areas, and those include educational opportunity, safety from violence, and girls the next generation. And I'm hoping to have our slideshow come up, and I don't know if that will be available. That's great. That's perfect. So if I could have slide 2, please. Great. So I want to talk a little bit about why we initiated a needs assessment of middle school girls. So as we all know, we're all too aware of the fact that middle school is a critical juncture for girls, and especially girls from low and moderate incomes who have limited access to resources ranging from menstrual health products to mental health services. All right, if I could have slide 3 now. Thank you. So this is a quotation from the Worcester Needs Assessment of Middle School Girls. They did just a fantastic needs assessment in 2007. I'll just read this slide for you. Girls' needs, experiences, challenges, perspectives, and resources are often unique and therefore need to be examined separately from those of boys. That's very important. Middle school is a time when many different types of transition occur simultaneously: physical growth, cognitive development, social changes, and school restructuring often happens. Easily accessible, currently up data on girls are lacking. That's from the Worcester report, and we found to be the data was lacking also here in Metro West. Unfortunately, many girls emerge from adolescence with poor self-image, constrained views of their future and their place in society, and a lack of assurance about themselves and their abilities. And popular culture, through social media often, further helps to deflate girls' self-esteem by marginalizing women and stereotyping their roles. So our mission at the Metro West Women's Fund is to change the lives of women and girls with low incomes by identifying the needs as well as the gaps in services, and by raising awareness of those needs along with the funds to meet them. We believe our needs assessment provides crucial missing data for those working with and serving girls in our community and helps them to identify the gaps in current services. And our needs assessment explicitly concerns the 11,600 middle school girls and their families from the 33 towns in our catchment area. And could I have the next slide, please? Okay, the project itself. In partnership with the Framingham State University, we conducted a needs assessment and created a report that identifies the needs of girls and produces critical data on issues including emotional and mental health, self-image, gender identity, social relationships, physical activity, and COVID concerns. Could I have the next slide now, please? All right, how did we did it and the response? So an electronic questionnaire regarding the needs of middle school girls was prepared in 2020, which is all of you can remember was in the depths of COVID. And in January and early February of 2021, the questionnaire was sent to principals at the 37 middle schools in the Metro West catchment area. And the response rate of 54%, so that's principals at 20 of the 37 schools responded, was very strong. The towns represent large and small communities, towns with great ethnic diversity, and a full range regarding incomes of community members. And I'm going to turn this presentation now over to Rachel to give us the results.
Thank you, Rebecca. And could I have the next slide, please? So, and also thank you to the Wellesley Centers for Women. It's just such a joy to be here with you talking about such a critical issue. So generally, we had a higher level goal of using data-driven research to identify emerging and ongoing needs of girls with a focus on the education and needs of middle school girls, and particularly those from low incomes. And with the input and support of the professors at Framingham State, they really encouraged us to focus on an institution. And that's why we decided to focus on the principals at the middle schools. A larger goal is to educate community residents, stakeholders, and leaders about the identified needs, which we're doing today. And we also want to educate the community and donors about the needs, existing resources and gaps, and to increase strategic philanthropy. Part of our mission is to increase the amount of resources that go to women and girls. Right now, nationally, it's 1.9% of all philanthropic dollars go to organizations exclusively focused on women and girls. And I know we can do better. Could I have the next slide, please? So right now we're going to talk about sort of the highlights of the greatest areas of concern that we heard. First of all, I want to let everyone know that the full report is on our website and there is an executive summary. The executive summary and the points we're going to review today are those that the principals identified as of greatest concern. There are also issues that they identified as moderate concern and low concern. We're not going to talk about those today, but they are in the report and they are certainly relevant. So front and center, every which way, mental health just emerged as the highest concern for the principals about the girls. The mental health conditions included depression and anxiety and were considered considerable concern. Regarding aspects of self-image, areas of, again, considerable concern, which was the highest level concern, body image, self-esteem, and feeling confident and self-assured completely dovetails as to the experience of girls on social media that we just heard about earlier. In terms of social issues and relationships, bullying is of moderate concern and peer pressures of also considerable concern. And again, interfacing with social media is very high in these issues. Also of significance is that we found more than half of the principals said that the services provided were not adequate to meet the needs of middle school girls. This is a huge issue, and we all know that the schools already have an enormous amount on their plate. So a big question for all of us going forward is, where are the resources going to come from to meet these needs? Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. One of the pieces that the researchers did is that they also wanted to put a economic lens on this and looked at the per capita income for the 33 towns that we serve. And it came out about each group represented about a third, which was interesting when you're thinking about Metro West. So the first was less than 50,000, between 50 and 70, and then more than 70. We did a community presentation last week and someone shouted out, there are people making less than 50,000 in Metro West. So that's, of course, is completely true. And everything we do is part of educating the community about what is really going on. One thing that was noted of significance is that the principals reported more problems were perceived in the communities with a lower per capita income. This is not surprising, but it's good to have the data. And covers all areas from gender identity to lack of physical activity. Could I have the next slide, please? So we also, we started with a gigantic survey and we knew that people's time was precious and we cut and we cut and we cut. But we wanted to ask the principals what was not in the survey, what should we have asked? And we were very impressed by what they had to say. So again, so many of what they raised interfaces with mental health. So when asked to identify any health-related conditions not identified in the questionnaire, respondents listed conditions that were overwhelmingly associated with mental health, including self-injurious behaviors and suicide ideation. And also right here in the center, the effect of social media on the lives of girls, especially during the pandemic. So this was released and designed in the pandemic and during the pandemic. And so there's so much that has happened since then in terms of social science and the media concerns. Could I have the next slide, please? So where do we go from here? First of all, we're kind of small and we do everything in collaboration. So when we say next steps, we mean everybody. So one of our first things that we're really focused on is community outreach and education. We are here today, we speak to Rotary clubs, chambers, banks. We really want people to understand and care. We're here to amplify the needs of girls, and it's an educational piece. I want to highlight that after our needs assessment and finding these very concerning and disheartening data about girls' mental health, the Youth Risk Survey came out recently last fall, and the Metro West Youth Risk Survey, which is self-reporting, showed a significant discrepancy between girls' and boys' mental health, that girls, almost 30%, had greater suicidal ideation, self-injury, depression, and anxiety. And this was before the report just came out from the CDC. So at the Metro West Women's Fund, we'd had a good year of fundraising in our third year. And we were saying, we've got to do something and we've got to do something soon. So we created our first impact grant, and it's on Girls Mental Health Impact Grant. We had $25,000 to give away. And we had been meeting with many, many people around this issue. We gave it to Linda and her center because we were so impressed by her compassion, intelligence, and research abilities. She was one of the few people who's talking about how do you create a community program for middle school girls that combines social emotional learning and education around STEM careers and collaboration. And it's also focused on low-income girls, which is certainly part of our mission. So we were just so impressed, and we have just recently awarded her this grant, and Wellesley College has generously matched the grant. and it's going to expand the work that she's already doing it and bring it to Metro West. So we're just so excited to be here and partner with the Wellesley Centers for Women, and we look forward to questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rebecca and Rachel. That was a great overview, not only of the Metro West Women's Fund, but also of your recent study, which is so important to provide a baseline that other people can work with to start working with you to solve the problems. So given that you've shared that broad report with the audience, I'd like to now move on to talking about some of the innovative solutions that our panelists have been developing to support girls' well-being. So I want to turn to Linda and Catherine. You've been working together for a few years now to run a free summer workshop to teach girls about STEM concepts and how to use social media in healthy ways. Can you give us an overview of how you've turned your research into action to develop that program? Linda, kick us off, please.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lily. And thank you so much, Rebecca and Rachel, for your generosity and for believing in this project. That's how innovations can survive and sustain them in themselves with people like you. So Catherine and I met in a Wellesley College Computer Science Department talk given by a prominent scholar in this field, Dana Boyd, back in 2019. And from there, we found out that we were interested in creating something tangible and action-oriented, inspired by our data, to make a meaningful difference in our communities, and who are asking for help now, not when the study is over, but now. How can we run any kind of workshops or kind of webinars? This is back before COVID, when Zoom wasn't a thing, and so back in those days, it was in person, actually, these workshops. So much like the findings that they had just presented for the needs assessment, our youth in our surveys and interviews, and our parents were telling us that the youth were wanting to increase their self-esteem in their digital worlds. They wanted to build confidence in working with other people. They wanted to give and receive advice about emotions and social support, getting through life, about social media, how to do it, how to use it. They want to use social media to raise awareness about issues they cared about. So we decided to hold a workshop, a week-long workshop, as a space for youth to come together to discuss how social media impacts their lives, realize that they're not the only ones dealing with this, and that they can come together to collaborate on design solutions for future apps and programs that help us build positive communities and habits on social media. So back in 2019 and 2020, we thought the workshop was actually co-ed. But then as we kind of kept moving in this space, we realized that girls, especially marginalized girls of color, needed an even safer, more protected space to thrive in these conversations. In particular, when we want to talk about self-esteem and body image, such a gendered, kind of conversation that is easier to talk about when you're with like-minded people. So we switched to serving girls starting in 2021. And we're hoping to switch back to being able to serve other genders as well, if we can generate more resources and support to serve the rest. But right now, the virtual workshop is co-facilitated by a racially diverse group of Wellesley College student mentors who lead small collaborative groups toward a final project at the end of the week. And our diverse speakers from all kinds of racial backgrounds also come and talk and share with us about their social emotional learning expertise, about their expertise in the field of app development, social media platform industry kind of world. And also college students come to talk and reflect about how they use social media or think of themselves as STEM innovators. So we have a variety of kinds of inputs in the workshop, and Catherine can talk more about some of the things that we work on in this space.
Thanks, Linda. Perfect segue to Catherine.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, I will say that our workshop has this synergy that we're always kind of trying to find the best way to fine tune how these pieces fit together, with Linda coming from her perspective on the developmental side around identity and middle school students approaches to using social media at that particular age when they're first starting to kind of learn how to use it or hear about it from their friends, with an understanding of what STEM components are the most relevant for that age group as well. And we've tackled a lot of different ways of presenting what these platforms are, how they're built, talking about team collaboration in industry and how engineers work with designers, product managers, and all of the people that need to come together to make these products happen. Also talking about technical concepts, describing what the internet is, maybe tackling some misconceptions that they might have about how this technology works. Sometimes we hear them talk about the robots online when they mean algorithms or bots that manage some of this information. So we have those types of conversations right in sync with conversations around mental health and the information that they're seeing as they use these social media platforms. I will say another aspect that's really interesting about this workshop, in particular with this age group, is that we have participants who have never used social media as well. And we try to include those voices as well to hear from them what they hear from others around them, but including the perspectives of those who are non-users or not yet users, or those who are very active users is the space that we try to bring together around different design concepts to envision how these platforms could be if they were designed by middle schoolers.
Well, I can only imagine how exciting these workshops are for the girls themselves. And that's part of why I'm happy to really reiterate what Rachel and Rebecca just revealed, and that is that WCW has recently partnered with the Metro West Women's Fund to expand the summer workshop program. Rebecca and Rachel, can you tell us a bit about your hopes for expanding the workshops as a way to support the mental health of girls in the Metro West community? Rachel, why don't we start with you?
Great, thank you. Our hopes are your hopes. I mean, we really want middle school girls to have the skills to manage social media. It's not a question of saying, shut the door, right? We need to give them skills. We're very excited. We share Linda's position that it needs to be studied, but what are we going to do now? You know, in the meantime, while we're still figuring it out, we still don't have all the answers. These young women really need skills. And so our hope is that it will be brought to Metro West and really serve them well. I just want to say that the lab, we're so impressed by the lab, and we feel it's very well positioned to attend to the unique needs of girls during this critical developmental and transitional period that we talk about in our needs assessment. And I'm sort of borrowing this from some of Linda's language, but I just want us to think about, just imagine their lives. They might have their first smartphone and they're 13 years old. They're having increased or new interface and involvement with all different kinds of social media that is always changing too. And a lot of the grownups in their lives are not fully educated on this and can't even necessarily explain it to them. So the peer-to-peer piece is really important. And also they're having growing independence from caregivers. So in this new uncharted world, we really need to make sure that they have some skills so they can be well.
That's all right. I'll just add very briefly, because I think Rachel just summed it up exactly. When we first met Linda, we were so thrilled to hear about her program, and we've been talking to people in Metro West. No one is doing this type of program here, and it is desperately needed. So when we realized that we could make an impact grant and share that with Wellesley and bring Linda's program to some of our low-income girls right here in Metro West, we thought this is one of the best uses of our funds and resources we can do, because we had just done the needs assessment and the mental health concerns just shot to the top. And of course, social media, everyone, including myself as a parent, you're wringing your hands. What do we do about social media? And we don't seem to have many answers. And then Linda said, well, I have this program. And we thought, this is what we need. This is what we want to be able to share in our own community.
Well, I can say that we at WCW are equally excited about this partnership, and we can't wait to see what lies ahead. Now I want to dig into something that we've touched on briefly already. In any work that's about youth, it's important to talk to youth and give them the opportunity to shape the conversation. Maya, you focused on that work with the lab's Youth Advisory Board. Can you tell us more about that work?
Yes, absolutely. It's incredible to hear all the ongoing work in this topic, and I also just feel so energized and inspired by this. But I want to take one tiny step back and just kind of think of a bigger picture of how often as scholars in the field, we try to take the most cutting edge methods and approaches to studying social media and mental health for this particular population. However, we are indeed outpaced by the rapid evolution of technologies, as Rachel just mentioned. I definitely feel it more recently. It's getting harder and harder for me to keep up with the different cool technologies in the digital world that young people are using. And so I think that's one piece that's really important for us to think about. And quite frankly, there's still a lot of room for improvement in these methods to kind of further amplify the voices of and exhibit kind of the experiences of underrepresented youth. And so I think it's really, really important to kind of mention that before I dive into this a little bit more. As I went through my graduate school training, I really focused on these methods, and I was always really inspired kind of by the narratives that I heard by just talking to youth outside of the academic bubble. And so I really wanted to, I started to think really critically about how, in what ways can we really capture these narratives? Because these are the stories that are often missed by our survey studies and even our more structured interview kind of studies. And so this made me realize that really empowering these youth voices and stories to share their input with us in the process of developing these studies, in the process of developing these programs to support young people is really, really critical as we move forward in applying the research into kind of actionable solutions of education and programmatic change. And so I had experience prior to doing the Youth Advisory Board with Dr. Sharma. I piloted a youth participatory action project with in the space of social media and well-being with a group of Latinx teens here in California. And I was absolutely blown away, quite frankly, because their ability to have so much self-awareness about their social media use and the impacts they have, I think really inspired me to think about this topic really differently. And so when I had the opportunity to work with Linda and the lab alongside kind of the digital wellbeing workshop and integrating a youth advisory board, I think it really highlighted the importance of amplifying these girls who are emerging social media users and really capturing their experiences and having their direct input into kind of the process of planning and redeveloping the workshop throughout the year. And I think it also kind of talks to my earlier point about intersections of identity and amplifying young girls of color in this space is so important, especially knowing that they're still vastly underrepresented in STEM fields. And so I think this is one processes that we've taken to have kind of a shared control approach to have these youth stakeholders and us as adult stakeholders in this space to really create something that is relevant and something that'll really support them as they start to use these online spaces, because quite frankly, we're not getting rid of the online spaces anymore. So I think restricting them might be much more difficult in today's day and age. And so how do we educate them? How can we give them the tools to thrive both in the online and offline world is really important. And I think the Youth Advisory Board structure really allows for that shared control between youth and adults.
Thank you, Maya. I really appreciate the way that the lab is modeling youth inclusion, and I hope it's inspiration to others who have thought about it but maybe have not taken that step yet. Now, I know that there are a lot of folks in the audience, whether they're parents, educators, practitioners, or youth workers, who might be interested in signing up for the digital wellbeing workshops or bringing some of the approaches that we've talked about today into your own communities. I want to ask our panelists, each and every one of you, what would you say to folks in the audience who are wondering about that? Linda, what would you say?
Well, we have a flyer to sign up for this workshop that's hot off the presses. There's a webpage, wcwonline.org/summer workshops. Easy enough to remember. If you want to sign your young person up, we're looking for people that are, in particular, rising 6th through rising 10th grade is kind of like the big span of people, but most of the people that sign up are usually in the middle, like rising 8th through rising 9th, that kind of thing. When you're a little on the young side, it depends on who your child is. Are they okay with talking to strangers about social media? Are they going to be able to collaborate with other people? Do you want them to help hone those skills of collaborating, with other people, discussing, solutions together, with like-minded peers? We usually group them by age and stage. So if they're 6th graders with no phones or no social media, they are grouped together. If they are people who are really expert in social media, they've had a phone for several years, they're going to be grouped together so they can design solutions that are appropriate for their age and stage. And we are looking for a nice sweet spot of around 25, 30 girls. And we do it by first come, first serve at the moment. However, we do prioritize individuals, girls in the Metro West area who are of marginalized or low-income backgrounds or no parents in a STEM field. However, this workshop is open to anybody that can attend this workshop. It is free and accessible to anybody across states. Even we've had people in the past in 3 different time zones while we were doing this workshop, people in many different states, and we've had principals spread the flyer, and whole groups of girls will come from North Carolina or from Texas or from California, and it's so exciting to see that they're open and willing to collaborate with girls from all over the place. Hopefully there'll be a nice contingent from Metro West, all the different towns that can comprise that in the greater Boston area that actually come from quite differing experiences. Even though it's a small kind of group of towns and cities around this area, they come from varying backgrounds too. And so it'd be great to have them come together in this workshop and maybe find new friends, new communities. So let us know if you have any questions. You can always check us out online. We have our emails in there if you have any questions. Just to apply for it doesn't mean that you are committed to going. So you can always just apply for it and then decide later, but it is happening this particular week in the summer, July 17th to the 21st. It's 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. In case you are on the West Coast, please note that time. It is Eastern time. We used to have it in the morning, and then the California people were like, whoa, 7 a.m. is too early to get up in the summer. And so we had to adjust it, to accommodate different people wanting to enjoy their summer vacations.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Linda. So Maya, what would you say to people who really want to connect with the work personally?
Yeah, no, I think Linda and Catherine's work on the digital wellbeing workshop is just instrumental in changing kind of the trajectory of social media use for young people, especially young girls. I think one of the biggest gaps that I acknowledge is that there's not enough resources or kind of formal, I don't like using the word formal, but educational pieces for young people to learn about what it's like to be online, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, right? And I think this workshop is so powerful in providing that space for young women of color to really join in this movement to help really amplify their ability to use these online spaces for good. And so I think I highly encourage anybody who is within the age range or have kids within the age range to join this workshop, because I think it's a great introduction and a great tool to ensure that young girls are safe online and can use it in a way that supports their well-being. I also just want to acknowledge that these young people are the future. The youth are the future. They're the future leaders. They're the future community members and even the future researchers of this work. And so the more inclusive and diverse we can be kind of in these experiences and sharing the knowledge is so important. And so, you know, I also like to say, and Linda has inspired me to say this, that youth are the experts also in this work. They're living through it. I think as adults, we make a lot of assumptions based on our own experiences with technology, and that has changed a lot. And I recognize that now. And so, you know, acknowledging that a lot of them know what they're talking about and they're quite self-aware. And so, you know, in my time working with young people, they all know that too much social media is bad. And so I think, you know, acknowledging that these students have expertise, they are the ones experiencing the digital world in real time, and giving them an opportunity to be involved in the process, whether it's as a participant as a workshop or even helping us develop the workshop, I think is really, really important moving forward. And so if anybody in the audience is really interested in kind of this work of either creating a youth advisory board for your programs or your research, I think it's so important moving forward to keep involving them in the process. So yeah, I think that would be my big takeaway from this.
Thanks, Maya. Those are all great points. Catherine, I know you have some additional ideas about how people could connect with the work. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, first of all, echo again that if you have any, if you know any middle schoolers or teenagers who would be especially interested in joining, please have them apply. But in addition to that, our project, our team is very open to collaboration, to hearing from others who are interested in engaging with us. We have a number of opportunities for non-teenagers to participate as well. We've built up a robust team of Wellesley College undergraduates, even some high school students as near peer mentors to facilitate various parts of the workshop and of the design process. I'm actually analyzing some of the data around the experiences of the Wellesley College students who helped us last summer. And there's this really interesting intersection of them discovering an interest in education, as well as computer science, as well as design, as a way to think about a possible career path for them in the future. And this workshop opening that up as a possibility. So if you know anyone who'd be willing to engage in that way, if any students are listening in, please let us know that you might be interested. Or if there are any industry parents or people out there who'd be willing to jump into the workshop, either as a guest speaker to talk about your role in the industry, or maybe even possibly serve as someone to come and give feedback on some of the designs that students have been working on. We're always looking to build that part of the workshop out as well.
That's great. It's great that you're open to such a wide swath of people really helping support this work. Rebecca and Rachel, for people specifically in the Metro West area, how can audience members find out more about how to support mental health and girls on social media?
Sure. So Rachel and I wanted to share about 2 upcoming community events that are free and open to the public and that focus specifically on social media and girls' mental health. And I think the information will also be in the chat at some point. So the first community program we wanted to highlight is with Spark Kindness. And they have an upcoming virtual program on April 13th at 7 p.m. with Devorah Heitner. She's a PhD. And Dr. Heitner will address content from her forthcoming book, Growing Up in Public, Navigating Reputation and Social Media in the Digital Age. And she'll share ideas on how one can mentor kids on cultivating a healthy online presence. And the link is in the chats for anyone is available and would like to attend this program. And the second program we wanted to highlight is offered by Gateways Access to Jewish Education. And it's part of their mental health lecture series. And it's entitled Our Daughters, Our Future. Like Maya was saying, Our Daughters, Our Future, an educational series exploring girls' mental health and wellness. And that program, the specific program coming up is Girls on the Brink, Raising Emotionally Healthy Girls, which is something we're all very interested in. It's on March 21st, which I think is next week. It's at 7:30 p.m. and will feature Donna Jackson Nakazera and she's the author of Girls on the Brink, and she's going to answer questions from parents and teachers and practitioners who want to know, what can we do to help? That's what we all want to know. What can we do to help our girls? And Donna's going to lay out 15 science-backed antidote strategies, including insights and tips and scripts to use with the girls. So those are the two upcoming community programs we wanted to highlight, local, free access to the public.
Great, thank you. Those programs sound really awesome. You know, I can tell that the audience is really engaged because we've already gotten a huge number of questions. So I'm just going to jump right in. The first question is this. My daughter just turned 11 years old. We communicate by phone, on text, or on her watch. She doesn't have any social media installed on her phone except for Messenger Kids. How can we continue to foster this habit in her? When should we expect that she'll change her attitude towards social media? So I think it's kind of a developmental question. What's the timeline here with teens and social media?
I mean, any of us could probably jump in, but I'll start us off that a lot of times parents think that their kids aren't on social media because it's not installed on their phones, but they probably know all about it from their friends, and their friends are showing what they're doing on social media, or maybe there's some group chats in which there's screenshots happening with, you know, what's happening on other people's, you know, social media. And so they're probably not completely in a bubble, which is actually not a terrible thing, because in a way they've distanced themselves a little bit from being in the midst of it and not getting overwhelmed by it. So they have space. They've created space for themselves to not be expected to respond to any of these messages that are often laden with social obligations. You know, once you get into the foray and then you announce I'm here, I have signed up, oftentimes that adds that social obligation pressure, you know. And so I would say watch where they feel comfortable in, like, what are the motivations that they have for you know, wanting to jump into the foray. Are they, do they have limitations? Do they have boundaries? How can you help them with their boundaries? And also open up the door of them exploring, and they can always close the door back up again a little bit. You know, they don't have to like jump in and then go all in. They could do it in little stages too. I don't know if anybody else has any tips too.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in a little bit to piggyback off of that. I think 11-year-old is just such a beautiful time of development. And I think it's also kind of this transition out of childhood into kind of between teen years. And so I totally agree. It's such an important time to engage with young people in kind of this space of how do they use these tools? How are they going to adopt social media? And so I think one thing that both Linda and myself also kind of do this work on the side of what is the parent's role kind of in this adoption. And I think active communication. So communicating with your daughter is so important, and having kind of an open door to communicate about these things, about how to use technology, how to use social media, I think can really help the relationship as well. You know, from a developmental lens, I think this is also the period where adolescents begin to kind of prioritize their peers a little more, and maybe not want to listen to parents as much. And so kind of keeping that in mind too. I think the earlier you have open communications about these tools and about the things that they're going to eventually be on, I think the stronger the relationship probably between a parent and a child will be, but also they'll feel that they can trust the parent to come to them with questions about social media or how to use these online spaces. And so I really think communication is really key, and just acknowledging that they're at a point in their life where they're exploring different social groups and different social networks is totally normal.
Thank you both. You know, we've got questions rolling in like crazy. We're up to 19 questions, if you can believe. So I'm going to jump right to the second one. This questioner says, I would like to hear the panelists' thoughts on the possible connections between teen social media use, mental health challenges, and the proximity of teens to politics and human rights issues. I ask this because I've heard that teen girls are suffering from higher rates of depression and are more likely to be depressed if they're liberal leaning or have more exposure to political issues. That's an interesting question. Who'd like to tackle that?
Well, I'll get it going, just because, it is a very interesting, nuanced question, and there's several different ways to look at it. For instance, girls in general are more likely to be more depressed, regardless of the context, regardless of online, offline. In general, they're more likely to be depressed at earlier ages too, because they have puberty earlier, and so the hormones that are surging through the body lend itself to have more vulnerabilities to getting depressed, especially about their body or about their social obligations that they have. Girls are more likely to worry about the world's problems, and so if they're scrolling and seeing all the world's problems, all the current events, and all the things that are being talked about in terms of political issues, it's almost like an information overload as well. So if they increase access to that in which there's situations where it makes them feel more anxious and maybe more angry, then it's almost an issue of self-awareness. Like, if you notice that is something that affects you, then you might want to limit the kinds of things that you post or repost, or the kinds of people that are in your network. So I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts on that. Great, Rachel.
So this is an op-ed came out in the New York Times exactly about this issue, and it's not as much helping directly the girls, but it's about the parents and how to sort of make sense of everything and not politicize it. And I actually had it on my desk because I'm such a nerd, but it came out on Saturday, February 25th, and it's by Michelle Goldberg. And the headline is, "Don't Let Politics Cloud Your View of Teen Depression. Kids are struggling and a partisan fight over the causes isn't helping." And it talks about how there is some data that shows that more left-leaning parents, that their children, including girls, are on social media more. And is that automatically go to the conclusion that they're more depressed because of the social media? So it doesn't have a direct answer to that, but it talks about how to have a discussion around this without falling into partisan politics, and to keep our eye on the ball, which is children's mental health. And what does data show, and how is that relevant for our daily lives?
Yeah, that's a great response. We do have to stick close to the data and we need more research. So which is so great about this collaboration. All right, now I have a question that's very straightforward. This person said, I think they were tuning into the language that our panelists were using. They said, when you say rapid user, do you mean starting at an early age? So whoever used the word rapid user, please answer our questioner's query.
Yes, I think that was myself. And to clarify, I think rapid user can both mean that they're early users. So there are a lot of reports from Common Sense Media, from the Hope Lab, which are big collaboratives that really try to keep up with the pace of current youth digital media use. And so their reports show as young as 8 to 10-year-olds are on social media. And so, there is a group of young people who are adopting these tools early on. So that's one meaning of rapid. And I think another meaning that in which I use rapid is also that over time across adolescence, the increase in use over the years is most rapid among girls compared to boys. And as you look at it between racial, ethnic identities and groups, consistently also, as I said, Black girls or Black youth. I'd be remiss to say Black girls, but I think Black youth in general are among the most rapid adopters. So they use social media more and more at an increasing rate compared to other groups. So that's kind of my definition of using rapid.
Thank you, Maya. I appreciate that. All right, the next question is back to our own families. This person says, we haven't allowed our 13-year-old to have any social media accounts yet, but we know it's coming within the next year. What do you suggest to help set ground rules when first introducing social media to our daughter? Who'd like to take that one on?
I can quickly start the conversation, but I think my previous point, I think communication is like having open communication with the daughter and having kind of a safe environment in the home to talk about social media and how it's going online, I think is a really important part to jumping into this space of having the daughter having social media on. And I think, again, we can't shy away from the fact that these young people will be on social media eventually. And so the earlier we can facilitate safe spaces for communication, I think is really important, but I'll let others chime in as well.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I'm the mother of 2 sons, but all I will say is that just as a parent, we do try to have opportunities where we're just sitting down and talking without the phones, because we know all of us, even we adults, we become addicted to our phone and we're scrolling, doom scrolling, even whether it's the New York Times or Instagram. And I see, you go out into the world, you see families at the dinner table, outside at the table, and they're all on their phones. And I just think as a parent, just for myself, we do try to make sure that there are moments in our day where we're sitting down and we're looking at each other and we're just a little bit of time where we're digital free. That's just completely anecdotal, but that's just something that we all struggle with. And I think our children are watching us. So if we're always with our phones in our hands and looking at our phone, particularly at the dinner table, they're getting that message too. Yeah,
that's a great point, Rebecca. So now I'm going to go to the next question. And I know this builds off of something else that we said during the panel. If Black girls seek validation from social media at the highest rate, why is a Black woman, scholar or researcher, not included on this panel? And I'll start by saying, because we get this question now and then in other panels as well, and I always like to begin by saying I'm a Black scholar researcher on this panel, so I'll start there. But if anyone else would like to talk about some of the researchers in your network and things you may be doing and ways that we can address that issue, please do.
I mean, I would love to be able to feature the diverse faces and experiences of our entire network that our lab comprises. I mean, we've got, students that embody, racial ethnic diversity in spades, and in terms of income diversity, in terms of first generation, in terms of sexual minority status, immigration status. And so we also work with collaborators from outside of our institution of Wellesley College that also inform us with their deep expertise as well. So for this particular webinar, we wanted to really to have that intimate conversation with our closest collaborators at the moment. It doesn't mean our other collaborators, we don't love them as well, but we can't have 25 people on this panel. But I do wanted to also emphasize that Layli is one of our, she is our flagship, she is our executive director, and her embodying the diversity, priority in our research and action department is very, very important. And
I'll also just mention personally that I am a resident of the Metro West region, and we have a larger than average proportion of Black girls in Metro West compared to some of the other areas in Massachusetts. And I know that as this work evolves, we will be bringing in people who are, able to address those issues. So I appreciate the questioner for raising it. It's an important question. Thank you. All right, so for the next question, this asker says, good afternoon, dear panelists, and thank you for your insightful session. My daughter is rushing to screen time after school, as she says it's the only thing that relaxes her, helps her to relieve stress related to school. My efforts to substitute it for sports, getting out with her, offering to enroll her in yoga, etc., are fruitless. What are stress relieving strategies that you would recommend to a 14-year-old?
I can start. Again, I want to emphasize a lot that I've read and the speakers that are in the community series have tips for parents. So I encourage people to also attend, is about modeling behavior. So Rebecca mentioned it's if at some point with teenagers, we set boundaries, we have rules, but modeling behavior. So I think it's really important for parents to reflect on how do they relieve stress and what behaviors are they showing. And sometimes they're healthier, sometimes they're not. And once we figure out healthy ways to relieve stress that we can model, invite your teen, who will pretty much say no, to come along, but also always let them bring their friends. If their peer group is so important. So intimate time might be driving them around with their friends, sitting and waiting for them to be done at the mall with their friends. But it's to model behavior and engage them to bring their friends with them. Just a personal anecdote, I read everything, I did everything I could. And right before my daughter went to college, she wanted to show me something, she said. And she sat me down and she showed me her 10 false Facebook accounts she had created, which she had curated with different images and different personas, and they were for different people in her lives. I thought she had one that I was monitoring. I made her show me everything. I had no idea this. I mean, some of it was creative, and I'm sure there was some she hid from me as well. And she said she was deleting them all because the identities didn't have meaning for her anymore. She left for college. I was just shocked. I was in the dark. So I just share that, all the communication, all the model behavior, they're developing identities separate from us, and social media is a great way for them to do it.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that as well, I mean, I think it's also an acknowledgement that these tools, as much as it's a little bit scary for us to have unknown about how they're using these tools, I think it's okay to embrace a little bit that these tools can be a coping mechanism of stress. I think youth are undergoing a whole host of stress that perhaps some of us never had to experience, and so I think embracing these digital technologies as tools for them to cope. There's a scholar in the field, Dr. Stephen Schuler, who does a lot on digital mental health apps. And so I think also thinking about ways that young people could be accessing supports for emotional well-being, I think is okay too. And so I think I think Rachel's example is a great way of saying how are young people exploring themselves online and how are they coping with their stress. And but I also agree that there needs to be a careful balance and everything in moderation. So
Thank you both. Let me go to the next question. The best social media company I've seen investing in mental health for girls is Pinterest, which has banned weight loss ads from their platform and has been partnering with or investing grants in mental health nonprofits. How can we build stronger partnerships with companies like this that are getting it right? Do any of you have experience working with companies, or any that you'd like to speak to in terms of this question?
Yeah, I was looking at Catherine, but I'll start. Well, there are partnerships currently that aren't, kind of highlighted in the news, all the well-being aspects of users' experiences that are whole subsidiaries of these social media platform companies. Some of them are larger than others, and some of them have more funding than others. And some of them are focused on youth and the well-being of youth. I do know that there are some companies that are, with the recent rise in all this attention on, girls' mental health and, on social media, they are creating, app features that will help reduce the motivation to go to that. Like, for instance, at nighttime, if you're just all stuck on your phone and there's a problem with sleep loss, there's new features now that you can set on your phone to make your screen like gray, like not as exciting until the morning, and also figuring out the algorithms that will put things that are more positive spin in your feed rather than the negative spin. If you start typing start typing something about diets, and then suddenly there's like all this weight loss, ads, but they can tweak the algorithms to make it so that it's not a bunch of weight loss ads, it's a bunch of body positivity ads, so that's the kind of thing that I think there are programs that are in place like that, but that doesn't make front page news.
Catherine, did you want to add something?
Yeah, this might be kind of a grandiose view of all of this, but there's a direct conflict between the business model of these platforms and mental health. And I think that would be a really interesting avenue for further exploration, is maybe kind of shifting how, whether it's ads or money or users, the snowball growth effect that these platforms need to obtain in order to be more engaging and get more users, often increases possibilities of exposure to, say, political messaging that might be very divisive, or messages that keep users addicted or spending a lot of time on the platform. All of these are possible effects that contribute in some way to what we're discussing around these mental health challenges. And I think each platform in the given structure that they currently have can add small features to maybe try to make things better. We're also seeing some of the core systems like Android or iPhone adding in features to help users monitor specific applications, even if it's not internal features within each application. But I think there's a lot of open possibilities around reimagining how we're communicating through these different technologies, and rethinking maybe what those business models are too.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Catherine. Thank you so much for putting that in the conversation. All right, the next question is going to get everybody to stretch a little bit. So this is a question for any of the panelists. What value do you see in co-educational programming for young people ages 10 to 14 about relationship health and well-being? As tween and teens begin to engage in romantic relationships, is there value in girls learning about the effects of digital media on their relationships alongside their male and non-binary peers? So anyone can answer that.
Maybe I'll just say that that's actually not something that we've spent a lot of time discussing in our workshop. Maybe something for further exploration, but we've worked with maybe a slightly younger crowd than when really having that as top of mind questions, but I'm interested to hear what others think.
Yeah, the 10 to 14 is sort of like a pre-dating kind of age, but also there's definitely value in any kind of configuration, depending on how you design the facilitation and the topics that are safe for everybody to discuss with in the same space. So we used to have a co-ed workshop, actually two iterations for co-ed. And what happened was it felt like the girls were on a track and the boys were on a track, and the non-binary individuals were on their own track. And so it felt like it was not attending to the specific needs of these different populations, even within our small group of 20. And so we needed to be a lot more specific, but there's definitely, value in having co-ed experiences for sure.
Rachel, did you want to weigh in?
I did. I just, it's not a direct answer, but that one of our grants was given to Voices Against Violence, which is an organization in Framingham. And they have a curriculum for middle school girls about healthy relationships and domestic violence. And it's called Love Shouldn't Hurt. And they feel, in terms of prevention, that it's really important to have these conversations with middle school girls, many whom have not yet started dating. And for whatever it's worth, they believe that they have it as just girls for safety and safe space reasons. So that's an interesting response.
Thank you very much. All right, well, so the next question is much more straightforward, and it'd be great if everybody offered their answer. What age would you recommend is best for starting social media?
I'll go. I mean, I have no idea what the answer to that is, but I will say that an expert, a psychologist once told me that it was very crucial for young people, especially teenagers, to have their phone and to have access to social media. And that as a parent, I should not take away the phone as a punishment because it's very much tied to their social life and their self-esteem. So I thought that was rather astonishing. So I will share that with the group that's possibly there maybe could be other ways to do that, but that's how important phones and social media are to young people, that this psychologist said, don't ever even consider using that as a form of punishment.
Thank you, Rebecca. Other people? What's the best age to start? Researchers.
Well, I happen to have a paper about early social media initiation and what happens if you do it from 13 versus 11 and 12 versus 10 and younger. And I know people keep saying, no, aren't you supposed to only be on it at age 13, because that's what they say in terms of, advertisers having access to your data, the limitation is minimum age 13. But in our studies, over 90% of people already are on social media by the time they're 13. So that ship has sailed. But in terms of a one best number, I don't think there is such a thing, because it really depends on, what are the kids' interests on there and how will it affect them and their daily life. Are they going to be able to self-regulate? Are they going to be able to handle the drama that happens? Are they going to be able to, function, and also find, joy in it? If they find it as a miserable experience, maybe they need to wait. But for some people, they don't need to wait. They want to be right in the mix of when their friends, get it. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. There's even some indication, the longer you are on social media, though, more likely you'll have more followers and more friends. That often leads to slightly more, you're more likely to have some kind of drama happen, like bullying or, getting addicted to it or that kind of thing. So the longer you're on it, more likely that'll happen. However, on the positive end, the earlier you're on it, the more likely you are to know about the positive uses of it, because people aren't telling you all the time that it's bad. You're already on it, and so you harness the positive parts of it early on.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I think context really matters. I think it's hard to have just one singular age for every young person and globally, and also in the context of the US. And so, for example, I think there's a scholar in the field, Dr. Mimi Ito, who does a lot on affinity groups online. And so one aspect of this is looking at neurodiversity and how online spaces have actually really helped neurodiverse youth groups to thrive online. And so I think as we consider context, as we consider kind of specific individualized situations, I think it's hard to say that there's one particular age, but I think it's okay to not be afraid if they are slightly younger. I think maybe age 5 is a little absurd. And so I don't think that's what we're trying to promote, but I think as they enter the transition from childhood to adolescence, that priority changes, their peers, they want to be more connected. I think it's okay to maybe begin exploring and just kind of considering different contexts that the child is living around.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go then to the next question. We're probably starting to get into our last few questions now. This is, I think, directed at Rachel, who gave the results for the Metro West Women's Fund survey. This person asked, I'm curious how or why gender identity was listed on the page 8 slide as a mental health concern. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. It was not lit. Thank you for the question and a chance to clarify. That was not listed as a mental health concern. It was a list of all concerns, including exercise or lack of exercise. The survey did ask principals about gender identity and whether they thought it was an issue for girls. And they responded that they thought it was of moderate concern, not that it was a mental health issue. It if I think that's clear.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Rachel. That's
Thank
appreciated.
you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So now we have a set of questions that have to do with the summer workshops and specifically about whether specific communities can engage in what ways. So I'm going to read all three of them since we're in the end, and this is probably going to be our last batch of questions, and then we can just tackle them together. One says, what are the resources available to girls in the foster care system or resources for girls that don't have a mother or mother figure? Another one says, is there a similar forum for high school girls? And the last one says, are there any workshops based heavily on social media and bullying? I know someone who's working through this. So if you don't mind addressing girls in the foster care system, girls without a mother figure, high school girls, and people dealing with bullying.
I could see that our summer workshop does welcome girls of older ages. They're usually in lower number, but they can also assist in helping facilitate some of the younger kids through talking through their social media issues. And sometimes the topics do come up that are related to online bullying and in-person bullying that turns into online bullying, or people feeling left out, or people feeling like there's they feel like they don't have a sense of belonging. Sometimes that feels like bullying. But I don't have any answer about the other aspects about not having a mother or a foster care, system involvement. I wanted to also answer the question of how can this workshop be in your community or possibly in an after school environment as opposed to summer, and those are all possible. We would just need to have a discussion about it and try to figure out how we can possibly make it work in the future, depending on the resources that are available to us and any future ones that could kind of land in our lap. So
thank you, Linda. Anyone else want to weigh in on that set of questions?
I think I just want to add to the question regarding high school involvement. I think one of the ways that we also kind of explore involving high schoolers is through the youth advisory board structure. So one thing that I forgot to mention is that, Linda had created this model of a youth advisory structure to have also near peer mentorship built into it. So not only was it middle school girls, it was also high school girls and college young women. And I think having that adolescent intergenerational piece of having near peer mentorship even within the youth advisory board created a space for them to discuss social media experiences and well-being experiences at that age and have those conversations even within that space. And so I think that's just one of probably many ways that we can continue to involve high schoolers in this program.
Thank you, Maya.
Yes. I just want to add that Rise Above Foundation, which is based in Hopkinton, is an organization devoted to young people in the foster care system and very committed to this. And they might have an answer that could answer someone's concern about foster care.
Thank you. And I think this workshop really demonstrates the importance of collaboration to bringing modalities like this to new populations and new communities. I mean, with the collaboration between the Metro West Women's Fund and the Wellesley Centers for Women and the Wellesley College Computer Science Department and so on, we see a model that could be replicated. Maybe there are other of you out there that would like to start such a thing, or maybe you have a way to help support getting it off the ground. That's certainly something that could lead to future conversations. So, I'm really glad to see that today's conversation has spurred such thinking about how this kind of work can be expanded, because we all know it's badly needed in the communities of youth today. So having said that, I want to thank Linda, Catherine, Maya, Rebecca, and Rachel for joining us in this important conversation today. Thank you all for sharing your insights on mental health, social media, and adolescent development, and for highlighting some of the ways that our audience can get involved as we work together to make a difference in the lives of middle school girls. I also want to thank everyone in the audience for attending our program this afternoon. As I mentioned at the beginning, a recording of the program will be posted on our website within the next week, and we'll email a link to the recording to everyone who registered for this program. So thank you and goodbye.